Hey there, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. It is Wednesday, February 20th. This is Raphael Garcia back for episode 12 of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast. Thank you for joining me once again. Please be sure to like and share our content. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel here. You can also catch us on Instagram and Twitter at MMA Ratings Net. And also go to MMAratings.net if you're a fan of mixed martial arts, where you'll catch a lot of our content and coverage of the sport. And you can also rate each one of the fights as they occur and let us know what you're actually thinking of the action you see in the octagon. But as always, every Wednesday we focus on professional wrestling here on this show, and I want to thank you again for listening to this content. Again, please be sure to share this information, share this show across your social media, and hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date every time we upload a new show. I missed a show last week. Don't even really remember why. I think I was actually pretty busy last week, but I missed a show, and now we're back today. And I'm kind of glad that I took that week off and had the opportunity to let some things unfold, as today we are talking about Kofi Kingston and the movement known as Kofi Mania. And this is pretty big for WWE fans to be aware of, because it's a conversation that's been happening over the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks, and I'm glad that I get to see it, and I've been able to facilitate and add some value to this conversation as well. If you've seen some of my pieces over on Daily DDT talking about Kofi Kingston and what he's been able to do as a professional wrestling star, I definitely thank you for reading that content, because this is a very important and special time in his career, and I'm glad that we are getting to enjoy that. Now, with that in mind, the first thing I do want to say about this is it's unfortunate the way it came around. For those of you who are unaware, the reason why Kofi Kingston has been inserted into this position is not only because he can perform and because he's one of those guys that can be trusted to step up when the situation is needed, but the main reason is because Mustafa Ali was concussed. I believe it was a concussion, but he did suffer an injury at the hands of Randy Orton, which knocked him out of the Gauntlet match and knocked him out of Elimination Chamber this past Sunday. So if that injury did not occur, we would not be talking about Kofi Kingston in this way right now. So that is important to kind of note, and it's important to highlight, because you can't automatically say that this situation would translate directly over to Ali. You can't necessarily say that. And at the same time, you can't automatically assume that Ali would not have performed in the same way if he was granted this situation. So it's unfortunate that this matter occurred, and it's unfortunate the way it did happen, but we are seeing some positive benefits out of it by looking at the way that Kingston has been able to perform these last few weeks. So what we've seen kind of goes back to the Gauntlet match, which occurred on SmackDown last weekend. On the the last week on the 12th. At that time, that's when Kingston was inserted in the match, and he was there for an hour, competing against the other 5 men that were in the Elimination Chamber. Well, Kofi started off the match with Daniel Bryan, and he would defeat Daniel Bryan, Jeff Hardy, Samoa Joe, before losing to who did he lose to? AJ Styles, who then lost to Randy Orton. So Kingston was in the match for more than an hour. The opening match with him and Daniel Bryan was especially amazing. Each match kind of told its own different story, and I think the moment that stood out to me the most is when he was facing off against AJ before AJ puts him out, and he's yelling at AJ that, because AJ's kind of playing the face character where he's like, yo, you've been doing this for an hour. You don't need to fight me next. Just go out, just bow out gracefully. And Kingston's yelling at him, telling him to fight me, because he's been waiting for this moment for 12 years. He's been waiting for this moment for 11 years. That's a callback that's important. That's something worth noting, because it speaks to the fact that he's been in the WWE since 2007, competing at a high level since 2007. We're going to go over some of his accolades before we close out this podcast today. But he has been in this organization for more than a decade, and he's been performing at a high level for more than a decade. To see him with emotion channel that during the match and make sure that that was clear, yell that at AJ Styles was powerful to me. I've gone back and I've watched that match twice since then, and it still is like fantastic for me to see from start to finish. But he gets eliminated by Styles, so now he is inserted into the Elimination Chamber, which was this past Sunday. So Kingston was the first man to exit his pod, the third man in the match, and him and Daniel Bryan last all the way up to the end, where I would say he and Bryan probably had 15 minutes of their own time, where they went back and forth, and to hear the crowd chant his name and just be behind him so much was something worth watching. They were basically, everyone was behind him, and it was. I was talking to someone on Twitter the other day, and they were saying the reason why the fans were so behind him is because they would have got behind any underdog in that situation, and I can agree with that. It reminded me a lot of when Santino was also in the chamber, and he was the last man to face off against Daniel Bryan, and it was a moment that we knew Santino wasn't going to win the title, and it was hilariously amazing to see fans pop for him so bad every time that he came close to winning the belt. This was a little bit different, though, for Kingston. It was almost there was more of a space where you thought that there was a bigger opportunity for him to win the belt. Throughout the night, it became a little bit more clear to me that that wasn't going to happen, especially as multiple titles were changing. I think the Intercontinental title changed hands, the Tag Team title changed hands. So you usually don't see shows or multiple belts like that change hands, except for like the major shows like a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania. But the whole time I was watching Kingston and Bryan perform, I kept telling myself they're not going to do this. I had to kind of ground myself in that moment because I felt I was getting too excited watching Kingston perform. I mean, I've always been a fan of his work. He's been one of my favorite wrestlers for an extended period of time. So to see him in this position was exactly what I wanted to see. But alas, he did not get the win on Sunday. He was eliminated, which was kind of understandable. But that brought up a conversation about what is next. What is next for Daniel Bryan? What is next for Kofi Kingston? What is next for that title? Because to be honest, Kingston wasn't doing much before this situation kind of created itself. He was with the New Day. They were doing their thing, remaining in the tag team title picture, but they weren't doing anything that was big and impressive at the time. So after the chamber on Sunday, conversations began to go back and forth about what is next. What is next for all of the men involved. With Bryan, it seems like people were talking about WrestleMania immediately and not even really focusing on Fastlane because they were growing rumors that the WWE was going to bring back someone to bring back a returning star to face Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, and it seems right now that narrative is leaning towards Kevin Owens, and you see Kevin Owens doing those oddly weird vignettes with his family, bowling and stuff like that, but that's a conversation for another day. Most people seem to believe that they're going towards Kevin Owens as the next man for Daniel Bryan to face at Mania, which is okay, it is what it is. But on SmackDown this past week, we saw the situation unfold where now Kingston is the number one contender, and he's facing off against Daniel Bryan at WWE Fastlane. Let me see when Fastlane is because I actually do not know. Let me check. Fastlane this year is on March 10th, so it's in it's in 3 weeks. So yeah. Kofi Kingston is the number one contender, and he's having a one-on-one match against Daniel Bryan. I think that is a good stopgap. It's not the moment we all wanted. We wanted to see Kofi Kingston win the title and win the title at Mania, but it's like I said, it's not the moment that we wanted to see. But it allows the build it gives us 2 weeks to build to that moment, 2 SmackDowns to build to that situation, and hopefully we get enough of a narrative that makes people truly invested in this moment. I do believe that Kofi's someone that can deliver in big matches. He's done it. I mean, he's been a walking highlight reel for the Royal Rumble, for major matches like the ladder matches and TLC, etc., etc. He's someone that can deliver. Like, he is what is considered a good hand, and that's not meant to be said in any demeaning way, because he's someone that can be inserted into a match last minute and be given confidence that he's going to go out there and he's going to perform at a high level. That's exactly why he was inserted into that gauntlet match last minute. So now we have a situation where he is competing against Daniel Bryan for the title, and I'm like, man, there's no reason why they can't put that strap on him. At 37 years old, he's headed towards the lower half of his athletic prime, but there's no reason why that belt cannot get put around him and he be a justifiable champion. I mean, the WWE Championship has had some belt holders that include the likes of, The Miz, Jinder Mahal, Bray Wyatt, Dean Ambrose, Sheamus, Alberto Del Rio, and others. If you think that Kofi Kingston isn't as deserving as each and every one of those men, then we need to have a serious conversation, because he's done much, much more than all of those guys. For example, I mean, he's been a champion in WWE for nearly 1,500 days across 15 title reigns. He's a one-time World Tag Team Championship. That's before they broke off into two brands. He's a 4-time Raw Tag Team Champion, 3-time SmackDown Tag Team Champion. And what a lot of people forget is that he's a 3-time U.S. champion and a 4-time Intercontinental champion. I'll put it to you like this: the last year that passed, complete calendar year that passed, and Kofi Kingston did not have a title, was back in 2014. So let's see. He held a title in 18, 17, 16. No, wait. He held a title in 18, 17, 16, 15. 2014 is the only year that went start to finish in which Kofi Kingston did not hold a title of some sort. So that's all the way back through his debut. He debuted in 2007, so he earned his first title in 2008. He's held a belt in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 9, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. So he is recognized as a champion's champion. He's recognized as someone that's right there on the cusp. The WWE Championship is the only belt that he's missing that would give him the placement on the list of Grand Champions and Grand Slam champions. Excuse me. That list of Grand Slam champions, there's only one other African American, or excuse me, there's one black male on that group, and that's that's Booker T. There hasn't been any other individual of black and brown skin or of black skin tone on that list. The only other minority is Eddie Guerrero, who's also recognized as a Grand Slam champion. But I think Kofi Kingston deserves to be on that list. I think he deserves the opportunity. It's hard to see how anyone can argue against that. I wrote 2 pieces this week for Daily DDT about Kingston, kind of reminding people about why he's such a great champion, because in many ways I understand why people forget. In today's professional wrestling space, especially within the WWE, titles change so quickly. They aren't seen with the same allure as they once were. Even though we have 2 men like Brock Lesnar and AJ Styles was a champion for an extended period of time, but Daniel Bryan is a champion currently. So you see that they do put formidable men in the position to be champions, great characters, everyone, and these belts do have much meaning. They have much more meaning than oftentimes they're given note to having. But that doesn't mean I'm asking for Kingston to have a title reign that's comparable to AJ Styles' last title run. I'm not expecting him to break the records of someone like a Pete Dunne, who's held his belt for nearly 2 years, or a Brock Lesnar, who's been champion for more than 500 days. I'm not expecting that, but allowing him to win the belt, hold it for 1 to 2 months, is exactly what I want to see. I would love to see him win the belt at Fastlane, hold it into Mania, and then go about his way. That doesn't mean he needs to be. Well, what I would like to see him booked as a credible champion as well. This is a career achievement for him, one that he deserves, because he's been doing this for so long and doing this at such a high level for so long that it's hard to ignore his success as a WWE roster member. He deserves this, and I think that it's time that it's recognized to provide him with this belt. I believe that Mark Henry was the last black man to hold a major title in the WWE. And because I was doing some research at the start of the show, and I could not find any others that have held the belt. And remember, we really we don't talk about The Rock in that space, because I do not believe. I think he looks at his ethnicity as Samoan and not necessarily African American Samoan. And yeah, I'm not sure. And I think he recognizes his dad's nationality is Canadian, but I don't think he considers himself an African American. But that's neither here nor there. So that's why we don't recognize him as as a black African American, as a black and/or African American main WWE champion. It's 2019, and the organization still hasn't had anyone at that level. But Kingston, he was born in Ghana, so he's an African immigrant. But even his inclusion in this storyline, seeing him in the main event picture, it makes me much more invested. I'm much more excited about seeing him wrestle. I'm much more excited in seeing what he does, watching him perform. That is yet another example of why I push the narrative that representation is so important, because it gets people involved when they see someone who looks like them. Like I was saying, I was talking to I think someone from Voices of Wrestling on Twitter, and we were talking about how anyone that was an underdog would have been praised in this matter and kind of held up by the fans in the wrestling community. And I can agree with that. I can see that space. But if this was a Ty Dillinger, which was the example that was thrown out, and I'll make it clear I'm not a fan of Ty Dillinger for some of his recent comments, but I would not have been as invested as I am with Kofi Kingston. Kofi is someone who looks like me, someone who I want to see at this at this point. It's funny because the WWE title picture across the board has been mainly white over the last few years, but you see over the last couple years, but you see Sasha struggled to remain women's champion. The New Day were mainly in the tag team picture. Bobby Lashley, R-Truth, and Velveteen Dream all won individual champions recently. Individual titles, but they've all done so during Black History Month. So that's neither here nor there. That's another conversation for another day. But Kofi Kingston in this position gets me more involved, and I'm sure it gets more people that look like me more involved and more invested in this moment. I think that he deserves it. I think that the WWE should allow him to be a champion at WrestleMania in some way, shape, or form, and I hope that that's what comes out in the end, because I'm not going to lie. I think Kofi Kingston is a shoo-in for a Hall of Fame. Winning this title would make it just a matter of time, and I'm here for Kofi Mania. I don't want to see anything else. I'm going to be there in April, and this is a moment that I would love to be a part of. From start, I couldn't care less about. There's other, we got the Becky, Ronda, and Charlotte matches coming up. We'll have other moments. We'll have Seth and Brock Lesnar. But if Kofi Kingston was to win the title or leave Mania with the title on his shoulder, that would be the biggest moment for me. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out for this episode of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast. We'll be back next week. And as always, I thank you for taking the time to listen to our content. You can find me at rgarcia_sports on Twitter. You can catch me on, I'm not going to say my Instagram because that's personal, but rgarcia_sports on Twitter, where I'm always talking about professional wrestling, mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu and basketball, and other stuff in there at the same time. Follow MMA Ratings Net on Instagram and Twitter to stay up to date with our content and what type of stuff we're producing. But with that in mind, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. As always, we appreciate you doing so, and liking and sharing our content across the social space. Again, my name is Raphael Garcia. This is episode 12 of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast. And I thank you everyone for your day, and have a good night. Have a good rest of your week.